الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره. Eid Mubarak. So I hope all of you are enjoying your Eid. قال الله تعالى في القرآن الحكيم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة يقاتلون في سبيل الله فيقتلون ويقتلون وعدا عليه حقا في التوراة والإنجيل والقرآن ومن أوفى بعهده من الله فاستبشروا ببيعكم الذي بايعتم به وذلك هو الفوز العظيم. صدق الله العظيم. Surely Allah has bought their lives and their wealth from the believers in exchange of a promise that Jannah shall be theirs. They fight in the way of Allah and die or are killed, on which there is true promise as made in the Torah, Injil and the Quran. And who can be more faithful to his covenant than Allah? So rejoice in the deal you have made, and that is a great achievement. So Mufassirin says that this ayah was revealed at the point of Bayt Aqaba, which 12 people of Medina did with Prophet ﷺ, and in that transaction. But let me tell you a story today of a man who came 600 years later and also fulfilled his promise with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn Shaddad, the famous historian, says that when this man was dying on his deathbed, he has been unconscious for almost 3 to 4 days. And they had to call a famous Sufi scholar of that time, Sheikh Ja'far, who was Imam of Khalasa, to come and recite Quran on his deathbed. And Sheikh Ja'far says that he kept reciting Quran while this man was unconscious. And when he finally reached to the ayah, وَاللَّهُ الَّذِي لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ عَالِمُ الْغَيْبِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ. This man opened his eyes and said, Sah, that you have spoken the truth. You have spoken the truth. And then he again went to his unconscious state and passed away on the 27th of Safar, 539 Hijrah. He was just the son of an ordinary man. His father was a soldier, Najmuddin, just a simple police warden in the Seljuki forces. And he named his son Yusuf. Yusuf was just getting trained in regular daily madrasa sciences, though they say in history that he was very skillful horseman. And he had good noble qualities to show. Ibn Shaddad says that at the age of 26, when Yusuf along with his uncle Sherko went to Egypt, sent by Nuruddin Zingi, that day Yusuf said he realized that he is entrusted with a great mission to complete. With a great mission to complete. He said, that day I realized Allah has not sent me to Egypt. He has sent me to liberate Al-Quds. And we know this man as Salahuddin. Salahuddin Ayyubi. You know, when he died, what he left behind? 1 dinar and 47 dirham. Ibn Shaddad says that we had to borrow money for his burial, because he did not leave anything behind enough that we could have buried him. There was some sword, some armor, and some dinar. So Qadi Fadil who was his great jurist of his time, gave the fatwa, let Salahuddin be buried with his sword, so that on the day of judgment, when he is going to be raised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is going to be leaning on his sword so that he can testify in front of Allah that I fulfilled that transaction. Why do we need to learn from history? Why do we need to know history? Because we have the history of our real heroes. We do not have the legacy of Superman or Spider-Man and Wonder Woman and all that stuff. We are left behind with the legacy of those who are real human beings, but they raise their ranks to fulfill their bi'ah with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That time was not much different from the time which we are having right now. It was actually just like this. Abbasids were holding the center, the great Abbasid Caliphate, which was weakening. Seljuks were controlling the north of the Muslim cities, while the northern African areas were controlled by the Fatimids. And the internal strife was going on. And they couldn't do anything except to fight against each other to take control of the lands. And what was the result of this dissension? As it has always been, according to the promise of Allah. Whenever Muslims, or whenever His people are going to be fighting, quarreling, and having internal strife, the result is always humiliation. And that's what happened. When Fatimids and Seljukis were trying to fight against each other in 1099, they lost Al-Quds to the Crusaders. Same story. Things don't change. So that's lesson number 1 from today's khutbah. Internal strife, whether it's based on sectarianism, whether it's based on ethnic origins, or whatever the case may be, is always going to result in humiliation. But then what happened afterwards? From 1099 till 1128, it almost makes 29 years. The only thing which was happening was internal strife, fighting, and all that stuff. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends one man and instilled in his heart that no, we have to do something better than what we are doing, and his name was Imaduddin Zingi. A simple soldier from Zingi clan, he rises up and starts working on the northern Syrian areas and trying to establish his base till 1144. So almost took him 15 years to establish and control certain part of Syrian area, and then he was assassinated by one of his slaves. And Salahuddin was born in 1137, so you can imagine he was only 7 years old at that point, not existent in the history. Imaduddin had a son named Nuruddin Zindi, who then was basically interested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise up to the occasion and respond to the call of the need. And he started working on establishing and unifying all that area which was around the Al-Quds. So was he fighting against the Crusaders? No. He was actually fighting against the other Muslim princes to establish a stronghold. And from 1144 till 1176, 30 years of struggle, 30 years of struggle to establish a stronghold in that area. Salahuddin, around 1164, was sent to Egypt, as I was saying earlier, at the age of 26. That's where he started realizing, okay, I have to raise to the occasion. And Nuruddin had a special reverence for Salahuddin. Nuruddin dies in 1176. While from 1164 to 1176, what Salahuddin was doing was establishing himself in Egypt to end the strife between Fatimids and the Seljukis and the Abbasids, and establish a stronghold. And finally, after the death of Nuruddin in 1176, he takes control of the Zengi clans and then establish the Ayyubids Caliphate. How many years it becomes then? 15 years of struggle. And in total, if you calculate from 1128 till 1176, it almost ends up becoming 48 years of struggle for a goal. Lesson number 2. If we want to achieve bigger goals, whether personal or for the sake of Ummah, it has to go on generational aims. One generation has to give that baton to the next one and train them and prepare them so that they can raise their ranks for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because we live in this modern age where we become fall prey to instant gratification, right? You click a button and everything should change. And we forget the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which He has instilled in this dunya. You have to struggle. And then from 1176 in 1187, 4th of July, 11 years of struggle before he enters into the Jerusalem as an honorable conqueror. But how does he enter? Why nobody else was given this blessing in this history to do the same thing? Let me tell you the reason. Because not only Muslim historians, but especially Christian non-Muslim historians say that he was the best knight which the world had seen. Because when he entered into Jerusalem, he implemented the sunnah of Prophet ﷺ, the way Prophet ﷺ entered into Makkah as a conqueror. He established peace there. He forgave all the subjects in the Jerusalem. He made sure that nobody is hurt and everyone was allowed to leave if they want to leave. That was his nobility. Lesson number 3. We cannot have honor in this dunya either individually or as a community if we are not able to implement the sunnah of Prophet ﷺ. Only by implementing his sunnah the way they need to be established can bring that honor for us. Things are not different, my brothers and sisters. Things are not different. 900, 700 years later. The same story, right? We are still looking, right, with all this trouble which is going on with our brothers and sisters in Palestine. Most often than not, we end up saying, where is Salahuddin? Where is Salahuddin? Where is Salahuddin? But why don't we just ask this question, why I am not Salahuddin? Why my son is not Salahuddin? Why don't we just end up changing the question now? Because if we are not going to change the question, how are we going to give this dunya those noble men and women who can bring honor to this ummah? We need to prepare and train those people. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease the pain and suffering of all those oppressed people around the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give the opening to the people of Palestine and all those people who are oppressed by the oppressors. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide the leaders to this ummah who can bring honor and salvation from its sufferings. May Allah guide us so that we can follow the path of Prophet ﷺ as it ought to be followed, so that we can live and die in an honorable way, so that we can also testify to the fact that we were able to fulfill this bay'ah with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And my brothers and sisters, وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. We are not ummah of despair. وَأَنْتُمُ الْعَالَوْنَ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Victory is yours if you are going to behave as mu'mineen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy upon us. Thank you for the azan.